Assalamu alaikum. This is going to be the final lesson before we actually start the book. So I did want to give a few pointers about studying. I don't know how many of you have studied in the so-called traditional way with scholars. So that means not studying online like we're doing now, whether it's a live or recording, or not being in one of these so-called, modern universities, but we'll try to observe some of the methods and manners of the traditional studying, inshallah. So, regarding this book, when we studied the book with Sheikh Mustafa, we did study the book a little bit unconventionally because most of the students there, or at least many of them, were a bit more advanced students. As such, Sheikh Mustafa, he added a lot of different questions, a lot of different details. I'm not going to go into all of the mas'ala or the issues and questions that our Sheikh included, because I think it's a bit above what people normally do as an introductory book. But I will try to include some of what he's mentioned and maybe some other material from other durus that will be suitable for beginner level students. So this might include things like, supplementary information, filling some gaps in the book, because there might be a few things where it might have been better if it got mentioned, with the idea of building a solid foundation for future study. I see a lot of people like to go and move through things quickly now. People are always asking, I've studied this book, what's the next book? And they want to jump all the way to Muntaha al-Iradat. The way that our ancestors were studying is that they would study several books at the same level. Like now we're studying at beginner level. So they would study several books at that level. They might even study some different shuruh or explanations of those books. And we should try to follow this way, because I've seen many times people, they studied a lot of books and in reality they're very weak. They don't know even the questions in the beginner book. They don't know some of the key principles. So you can keep reading as many books as you want, but the important thing is to learn. Another important adab or manner is that we need to break the habit of asking for evidence, at least at this level. There was a recent movement that affected how everybody thinks about al-Islam. We know the movement that we're talking about, but everything is, what's the evidence? This is the evidence. This is the stronger evidence. This is not the way, number one, we study the madhab. Number two, it's a very bad manner. Because, first of all, this is contrary to how our ancestors passed the knowledge. And, if we think about all the things in our daily affairs that we have taqleed, or that we follow, why is it that in these religious affairs we need to question? And if anything, we should have more confidence in people in the religious domain than the non-religious domain. Now still, you might say, I have a legitimate curiosity, or that I want to learn, and that's fine, but I would also, want you to think about that even if we want to talk about some of the evidence, we can give evidence. But unless you have a good background in usul, or knowing the guidelines on how we give preference to different evidence, you're still just like a parrot repeating something. Until you have a good mastery of usul, the evidence, it doesn't mean much to you, because still you might know why we have this position. But why did we select this position from all the evidence? That's the important question. So let's try for now not to be obsessed about what's the evidence. Let's have faith in our madhab. This is the madhab that Imam Ahmed established. Imam Ahmed is someone who memorized 1,000,000 hadith. Imam Ahmed is someone who was tortured almost to death to defend this religion, when almost everybody else just laid down and got out of the way. So that's just our Imam. If we see the biographies of everyone who passed this madhab down, they're full of great men and women. We should have strong confidence in that. So let's please leave this idea, I need to know the evidence. What's the evidence? I'm going to try to keep these lessons short, meaning under like 20 or 30 minutes. That way it can accommodate the busy schedules of people. Now, a few good manners and behaviors to observe while studying. First, one should have the intention to study. That's the intention of studying itself, and we can even expand this to like a dhikr of Allah, because we're thinking about the Sharia of Allah. It's always good in general to be in the state of tahara, especially when studying. There was a famous question that somebody asked the great hadith scholar al-Kashmiri. They said, how did you memorize all these books? And he said, I didn't touch any book except for I was in a state of tahara. So it's not obligatory, but it's a good practice, in general a good practice, especially when studying sacred knowledge. When we study, we should try to wear nice and modest clothes. So let's not sit in shorts or sweatpants at home. If we can, let's wear nice and modest clothes. It's good for men to cover their heads, women to have the hijab. Let's also be in a nice and clean place that's free from distraction if possible. I know some of us might have kids, but let's try to find that place if we can, inshallah. Let's take notes. The student should take notes. Inshallah, we'll be mentioning a lot of supplementary information along with the book. So please try to take notes. After you take notes, please review the notes. I remember when I was in university, they were saying like for each hour you study in university, you should study for 2 hours at home. I don't know we can apply the same rule or that we have to, but at least try to review the notes. Make sure that you have a firm grip on the concepts and the main rulings. It's also good if you can do some supplementary reading. I know that for those of you at least who don't read Arabic, what we have in English is limited, but we do have other books at this introductory level that I've seen in translation, like Akhsara Mukhtasarat, Umdat al-Talib. So there are things that if you want to read supplementary, it's available. Let's also try to finish what we start, and that goes for me as well, inshallah. If we're going to start studying this, we will finish it. And finally, perhaps even most importantly, let's act on what is learned. It's very sinful to be learning these Sharia rulings and ignore them. So this is going back to the first point, having the intention to study. I mean, what is the intention to study? Is the intention just to go through time? Is the intention to say to everybody, hey, I've studied this book? Or is the intention to learn the proper way to pray, to fast, to make wudu, etc.? The final thing that I'll say is just a note for serious students. And even before I say this, going back to the intention to study, my intention to teach this book, as it was taught to me by Sheikh Dr. Mustafa, is at least to present the minimum of what is needed for the daily practice of al-Islam. So that is my intention or my goal. I hope that we achieve it over the course of this book. That said, for those who are serious students, I strongly advise you to learn Arabic. Don't buy all the English books and say, I'm going to study them. At the end of the day, you can only go so far in English. Number one, limited books are written in English. Number two, anything that's high level and almost anything that's like an intermediate level book is not translated into English. And even if it is, like, I know part of Dalil al-Talib is translated to English, there's no sharh and there's no hawashi. So you're not going to go very far without Arabic. And Arabic is also a key tool to know usul al-fiqh. So if you don't have Arabic, you won't know usul al-fiqh. And the most you can do is memorize some of these rulings and just repeat them out like the parrot. So for those of you who are serious students, I advise you, don't waste time studying a lot in English. Get your basics down, which I think the book we're studying will, at least for the acts of worship, get your basics down. And then, or at the same time, invest time in studying Arabic, inshallah. So I hope that this nasiha or advice has been useful. It's advice based on some of my own experience. It's advice that I've received from different scholars. So I hope it is something beneficial. And inshallah, in the next lesson, we're going to start reading the book. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een.